Hey, welcome everybody back to the Biz Meet Global podcast. We are back for another episode. This is Tommy B, your host. Happy to be here, but thinking the world is getting crazy, isn't it? We're approaching some interesting stuff happening up in the near future here, right? With the election coming up and all that. And of course, it's going to start getting crazy. But we try to keep the politics out of it, but how do you do that when it comes to business and politics can affect so many aspects of our lives and especially business. So we don't want to turn this into a political podcast, but it's so hard to separate politics, from business, any subjects related to business, and especially if you're forecasting for the future, or just kind of looking at trends and whatnot. That's what we're looking at today. Today's episode, we're going to kind of just take a look at some current events, interesting stuff that's happening, and also some potential trends, things that are happening in the world. So thank you, everybody. Glad you're able to join us, whether you're here live with us or if you're listening, downloading this podcast. And once it's already been pre-recorded, that's fantastic. You may not be a live listener, but you're, needless to say, you're still a listener, and we value that very much, whether you listen live today or you download it tomorrow, the next day, or even, next year. We still appreciate you listening and supporting us by downloading, especially if you give comments. That's fantastic. You give some good quality comments, kind of contributing to the conversation. So today is Sunday, October 15th of 2023. And if you read the news or you get on YouTube, you will think that the world is ending. You'll think, World War III is beginning. The Antichrist is about to show, to show themselves. And of course, I'm afraid to say himself or herself right now. You don't know if there was an Antichrist, would the Antichrist be gender neutral? So I couldn't help myself there. How will the Antichrist identify? So you never know. So I try to stay off that subject, right? Just can't help but joke a little bit about that. But if you read the news, you're going to see it. It's like, you think the world's ending, everything horrible is happening. But of course, there are a lot of good things that are happening around the world every day. In our individual lives, there are many good things happening to a lot of us all over the world. But it doesn't get good ratings, and so the news isn't going to broadcast that. When I was, it's interesting. It seemed like it's like some kind of a conspiracy theory that you want to just make everybody, angry and all that. But I don't know more and more if it's just just how we as consumers and listeners and viewers and of media, we consume that media is just our behavior. We like that shocking stuff. We want to check it out, see what's going on. And we like to hear good stuff, but, it's part of our self-preservation when we hear something bad's going on. Hey, we want to know. We want to know what's going on that's negative, so we can kind of plan appropriately how to avoid it. That could kind of go back to our core selves, you're thinking instinct. So that might be a very natural thing. But when businesses cater towards that and say, hey, they want to hear negative stuff, let's give them negative stuff. Well, then you get this kind of ball rolling, as it's growing and growing, and got the self-fulfilling prophecies that are beginning. Our minds are thinking negatively. We're planning for all the negative. We hear more negative stuff. All the media outlets say that's what people want to hear. That's what we want to see. Let's show them more of it. And so they show us more of it. So we think that there's more of it, and and so we react crazier. And then the media says, "Hey, let's give them more." They seem to love it. They're lapping it right up, and it's like, well, we're lapping it up because we think there's some bad stuff going on, and we want to protect ourselves. So we want to consume more. We got to see what's going on. It just keeps going and going and going. But meanwhile, when you take your eyes off the media and just look outside, you just drive to work, for example, or you're just going to the grocery store, or you're running errands of whatever sort. And you just see how, if it's not in bad traffic is a bad example, but let's say it's not a heavy traffic time. One of those times you're just driving ordinary every day. It's a common occurrence when it's not heavy traffic, and you see the world is, in a country like ours here in the USA, in most places it's peaceful. Most of the time it's peaceful, and we forget that's our natural state. Being at war and fighting each other, that might be part of being a human being, but it's not our natural daily state. That's a state of that's in my opinion, that's a distressed state. Not what we're born to do. And I think people in general are good. We may be, a lot of people are tricky and this and that. Dude, that's not horrible. Clever, this and that. I mean, that's, what I'm saying? Those aren't horrible characteristics of a personality, but as far as bad people, like doing really bad things and, just nefarious stuff, they want to physically injure people for no reason. They just want to cause problems. They want to steal from people, and they actually enjoy it. I'm talking to people who, when they have an opportunity to do honest business, they would prefer dishonest business, because even if the honest business made more money or it was safer, they might choose the dishonest business because it gives them a thrill. That's what I'm talking about. Those kind of people. Yeah, they're not that common. I think good people are more common, and I think good people can do bad things. So we just, we always hear all the bad stuff, but there's a lot of good stuff going on. Walk through your life and you'll see there's a lot of people, they greet you, they say hello, and then you got some idiots that are kind of rude and they ruin your day. And we think that that's the, look at that, there's more rude people, but most of the people either didn't respond to, or they didn't, they didn't say anything negative, or they may have said something friendly. So most of the time it's kind of pretty neutral and peaceful out there, as long as you're not living in a war-torn country, or a very, very heavily, I'd say a heavily depressed economic area where the crime is really, really out of control. But and it's sad that our world still has places like that. So anyways, that it gets us to think about what's going to happen in the future, especially with these political things going on. And look at the world right now, and you see these tech companies that are related to business. They're it's just ridiculous to me that in this day and age, we as humans are still wanting, we're still not evolved enough as a society, so that how can I word this? Basically to say that, so that we're not evolved enough where the number of just selfish idiots is negligible. People who they emotionally just haven't evolved beyond like adolescent, certain characteristics. They may be very very developed emotionally in many ways, where you consider them a very a person with a lot of skills. They could do everything. Maybe they could even run a big business and be the CEO, but for some reason they still have the ability to ignore certain humanity, aspects of humanity, like safety. Like they have a profit and they know that they're making people sick all over the world just to make extra $1 million, or to them maybe they're making a bonus of several million, and they don't mind. And maybe they have the power to change it, and they don't, because they want that bonus. There are other people who they do want to change it, they just can't, because there's a system in place around them where they're going to lose their job and lose everything, and they'll be pretty much ostracized and crushed and driven out of their industry if they speak out about certain things. But I'm talking to people who have the ability to really say, no, we shouldn't, as a company, go this direction or that direction, because like say drug companies. I'm sure there's plenty of drugs out there that and companies out there that make good products. Just because there's some that will engage in some very baby-like. That's what I'd call it. It's just baby-like, just kind of adolescent behavior where they're like, "Hey, looky, I got all kinds of money coming in for this, billions of dollars, because we paid out the politicians, and look, we're making people sick with this vaccine or with this medicine or whatever it is, and we haven't even gone through the proper amount of trials." They know whether what's going on. They know whether it's ready for human consumption. But when you hear that they won't even give that vaccine or that medicine to their own relative, to their own mother or father, to their own children, why would they allow it to be out there in society? Now, I don't want to pick on drug companies. I'll just say any kind of product. If you don't feel comfortable providing it, it's got to be an appropriate comparison, right? You don't want to say, if you won't give it to your children and it's an alcoholic beverage, well, of course, you don't want to, doesn't matter how safe it is or how good the drink is, it's not something good for kids. So, just trying to have a good comparison. If it's a product that applies to, say, a family member, like it could, a product that you could offer to your mother or your father, would you? And if not, because of obvious safety reasons, why would you sell it to the general public? That's where you look at that and say, what's going to be the turning point in our society? When is it going to happen when you finally have CEOs of big companies finally get together and instead of trying to collude to find a way to organize society according to the way they think it should be organized, instead they get together and say, how can we protect freedom? How can we use whatever we have to just basically get out of the way? Just provide your products and your services safe and make sure that the playing field stays open and honest. That's all. That's what I think businesses should do. Make sure the playing field is such that any small business, individual entrepreneurs, anyone of any kind of ethnic background, anything, any belief systems, any kind of category, how you could categorize a person, they make it so that the playing field is such that as long as they obey the same rules that the big companies do, then they have a chance to grow and expand just like any other big business. That is, I believe, what is really good for society. Now, who's to say what I believe is the right thing, right? So we need people to, kind of discuss that. People who have a lot of experience with running large countries like the USA. They don't need me doing that. But it's just my thoughts, and hey, that's what this is, right? It's a podcast. I could have some entertaining thoughts, maybe get a laugh hearing what I have to think, or maybe it'll be of value to you too. Please join in the comments. Tell me I'm an idiot, or tell me it sounds good, or you agree. It doesn't matter. Just if we're going to be insulting, hey, maybe do it in a joking way. We can enjoy life, right? We can joke with each other and still disagree. We don't have to be insulting and nasty just because we're hidden behind a computer. We don't need to do that, although it happens all the time. So, but we're here in this podcast, kind of trying to focus on subjects related to business, which is related to our lives. And there's a lot going on, but looking at current events as far as things that affect our lives related to business like that, there are some interesting things that are happening. So I thought that might be kind of fun if I could just kind of look up some of the things that are going on related to what I was just mentioning, kind of leading up to with some of these CEOs of big tech companies, the leaders of those companies getting together and trying to organize society. I mean, come on, if you're a cell phone provider, who the heck do you think you are thinking you know how to organize society? I mean, give me a break. Just because you stand on a stage and say, "Hey, look, we made a cool electronic gadget." Well, you might have a lot of, and I'm not picking on any one company. I'm just saying, at all. And I don't mean that because I respect those companies that build any kind of products. I mean, I love it. I'm inspired when you see them build good products and they build a good company culture and all that. But when they start to try to affect other countries' elections or how our society operates, and they're going to try to create these try to get together and fund political movements. Now that gets to a kind of a crazy edge. That gets to be something that I think that's pretty sticky, isn't it? It's a slippery slope. Now you could have the tech companies running the world, or just any industry running our societies, or basically turning the politicians more so into puppets. Where the business leaders in certain industries have so much power, over politicians even. Take a drink, some water there, keep my throat from getting too dry, right? I can just keep going on and on and on about this. I love it. I'm interested, It's just fascinating to me, but sometimes it's fascinating how they can be, say, for example, some of these tech companies and other tech companies that are not tech companies, but companies getting together right now, they're talking about trying to come up with standards to to reduce carbon emissions. Emissions. So they're trying to affect our politics by trying to basically fund these initiatives or whatever that you're trying to create some sort of a system of rules, that companies need to abide by in order to make sure that they're fitting in with the green initiatives. That they're complying. Basically, they're coming up with new standards. What are they? A government organization? Well, they're using their company, their financial power to utilize our government to try to create these things. So here's one of the things that I heard, which blew my mind, that it's happening is, and you can look online. Here's a good question. You'll see if you get onto a search engine and you here's a good question. Just type this in there. Say, will Amazon require, Amazon, the online retailer. So if you type in, will Amazon require suppliers to report on emissions starting in 2024? That's one of those, if you put in some keywords related, you'll see that question pop up. And this is interesting. Coming from, looks like this is from the website business-standard.com. Let's see if I'm correct here, because that's where the pop-up. It looks like it's associated with that. The Science-Based Targets Initiative. Sounds like that's what it is. A United Nations-backed entity that validates net zero plans. Has removed Amazon from its list of companies taking action on climate goals after the tech behemoth failed to implement its commitment to set a credible target for reducing carbon emissions. So they're creating this so they can take them off their list, and like a little punishment, like slap them on the hand. Ooh, if you're not on the list of the good kids, then you're you get a slap on the hand. A little, you don't. You don't get to be a member. You don't get to be on their coveted list of the good children. So what's Amazon? What are they going to be doing now? Amazon is going to be requiring their companies, requiring their suppliers. It sounds like to report information related to their emissions. Some of their sellers. So this is ridiculous. Let's see here. Okay. Amazon starting in 2024. So yeah, if you look up that, look online and look at some of the information related to that. And it says Amazon, for example, and this is online here on Google, as I say, Amazon announced that starting in 2024, suppliers will have to share their carbon emissions data and set carbon mitigation goals to keep working with the e-commerce giant. So I believe also somewhere there's another article, something about, and this is good to look up, don't just rely on me. Please look on there and see. It's something about they're also going to require, and I don't know, when they're saying suppliers, they may be some of their, they're not talking sellers. They may be their own suppliers as a company. Amazon's going to have a lot of suppliers. They're going to require them, as it just mentioned, that's that goal, through these groups that pressure Amazon, companies like Amazon. You want to be on the list of complying with these initiatives? Okay. Well, now Amazon announcing, okay, we're going to have our suppliers have to share their carbon emissions data. Well, also it sounds like I saw another report about it saying that Amazon might start requiring their sellers to also report certain information. I don't know if that's really going to happen or not. That's something to look into. And maybe some of these payment processors that these online retailers use, they might force it so that even if the platform doesn't want to do it, well, they can't accept payments because the payment processor will get through the banking system. They'll get to them and say, if you want us to help you pay your take payments, then you have to force your sellers on your marketplace. Each seller has to report. And they were saying having to even report information that they're not even responsible for. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like they were saying, even maybe some employees of a company might have to report, might force their employees to report how much fuel they use when they drive to work. Can you imagine that? You got to go to work and you got to report to your boss how much fuel you use, so that company can say, "Hey, here's the indirect amount, how our company affects the environment." This is so asinine; it's ridiculous. They're going to have to report. They have to collect information from all their employees who drive to work, and say, you can see they're going to have a little form that the HR department will send out, and you go, "Okay, everyone, it's time for the quarterly report. Time to fill it out. It'll be in your inbox. Check your emails." Now that they're all the HR department heads are going to have a voice like that, but that's just me and my comical view of how I see it coming to me. If I were working in a company like that, it's like, you got to make sure you have that stuff in. Okay, you got to have it in by the 25th and blah 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 blah. Or you won't be eligible for your monthly bonus or your quarterly bonus. So you can see it on the day to day. That's how that might happen. It's like, okay, there'll be questions like, how far do you drive to work? And how much do you pay for gas on average? And they're going to figure that out. And it's like, okay, well, here's your carbon footprint from going. So they're saying the company is causing this because they're giving jobs to people, and those people have to drive to their location, and their employees. So the company is indirectly responsible for the carbon emissions of their employees who have to drive to work. I mean, this is like, wow, you want to be a stand-up comedian? Man, wow, just look at the news these days. There's some of the comedy, geniuses of today are probably just thinking this is fantastic. There's so much material out there. And some of the comedy geniuses of the past are probably thinking, man, this is amazing. They got some crazy stuff going on here. We got a president who can't remember, his own name or whatever. So it's just comedy stuff, get the politics out of it. You got great stuff for materials. And this kind of stuff. Oh, you got people out there pretending that they're a boy one day and they're a girl another day. I mean, this is like great comedy material. It's almost like it's handed to them on a plate. And then you got this green initiatives kind of. Some of the stuff is so ridiculous. Their intention is good, but it's so ridiculous. Are they looking down the road and at the effects? It's okay. Maybe they are, and maybe the effects they're looking for are not what they're advertising to us, the general public. And that's something we got to keep an eye out for. So I think one thing that's beautiful about having free markets and making sure that the playing field is equal for everyone, and keeping that playing field honest, like a sport. As long as everybody obeys the rules, then whoever plays the best, the team, and obeys the rules, if they both teams competing, whether it's a team sport or individual, one person against another, like in, say, tennis. It doesn't matter, or if it's, European football or American football, NFL, it doesn't matter. This team sport or individual, the opposing one side versus the other obeys the rules, and they're agreed upon rules. That's got to be in there. That's paramount. Agreed upon and fair rules. Then it's the skill levels. The one person, if they're highly skilled, well, okay. It's just not fun to watch them beat everybody all the time. So you have different, because it's sports, then you have different, you have different categories. However you want to label it, you're categorizing. Whether it's in fighting, and you've got weight classes, you're going to have different skill levels too. You can categorize it so it makes it more entertaining. But that's because that's sports, and we want it to be entertaining and fair that way. So, but in life outside of sports, when it's business, you can't be ranking according to skill level. It's just you're out there in the woods. You're in the forest when it comes to business. Fairness is paramount, but you don't have weight classes and things like that. You should just have, here's the playing field, obey these core rules, and make sure that everybody else has a chance to get where you are, and don't interfere with that. And then whoever's the most skillful and operates the best, well, they succeed the most. And if we, the people, can somehow find a way to gather together using social media and any other platforms to make sure that I don't know how that's a slippery slope, but I don't know how, I don't see how, but it just would be nice if we, with our individual, but combined power too, we individually, but we all come together in that combined power. We, through our choices, we pick companies that are also supporting our freedom. We got to pay the lowest price. We got to live our lives. You pick your department store you go to, you got to do it. I do it. Nothing wrong with that. We have free will to choose where we shop. We shouldn't yell at other people because they're shopping somewhere that a store that you don't agree with. People, picketing outside. They're trying to stop people. I don't like that. They're trying to do it, but they're trying to forcefully do it. That's a whole new subject, though. Sometimes it's good, I suppose. I don't know. That's a deep discussion, right? Got to get smarter people than me to talk about that. But when you got these big companies coming together and they're trying to create these initiatives because they think they're going to save the environment. It's the ego, the level to assume that we do. Okay, so first, let me say, I agree, and I think most people do agree that, we need to take care of our environment. But one side says, let's just do it in a way that doesn't destroy our economy in the process. Because, hey, look how energy inefficient third world countries are, and look how dirty they are. Look when you go to pollution, because they don't have the infrastructure, the governmental, the public infrastructure set up to enforce all the laws. So you just got a bunch of crazy people going nuts, right? And you got to organize society in a way so that people won't just throw their trash out on the highways. Well, you need law enforcement for that. You need other things. You need some infrastructure, and that costs money. And it also needs to be honorable, right? So it's not going bananas and getting all corrupt. So we need free markets. We need businesses out there to operate well. We need people, ordinary people, to have the ability to be able to start from nothing, have no business experience and start from the ground up and use their work ethic and or their creativity, or both, and their intelligence, whatever, their resources they have available to them. And they have the ability to follow the rules and build up a business as large as they wish to. And I believe that a business, we shouldn't limit how big a business could get. I think we should more so just, foster, help to incentivize free markets so that there's healthy competition, because there's going to be a natural progression, right? You're going to have companies that get so big they just can't handle their own selves, their own operations. and natural processes, I believe, will take over. I think it's common sense when you think of it. It's just like in the forest. You've got certain animals that take over. Like, say, you get you get rid of all the predators in a certain area of a forest. You get too many plant eating, prey type animals. If you'll say they're they're herbivores, and they just start eating up all that area of the forest. And if they specialize in certain plants, well, you get certain plants that are just getting devastated, mowed out, eaten up, because they're not being killed off by the natural predators. So, there's an imbalance, but then nature finds a way. When that starts to happen, well, there's less of a food source. The next year comes around and there are not enough of the, springtime, and most of those plants were eaten up so much that they can't regrow. It'll take them a few years to get there. So now those herbivores are starving. That's an example. Or they move on to different areas, and now that area can heal and grow and whatnot. Or maybe the plants can continue to grow, but then predators start to realize, hey, there's a lot of walking food over here. There's a lot of herbivores over there. Let's they see the supply and they're going to hang around there, and then more predators are going to kind of come into the area, and then they'll start to kill them off, and it'll balance itself out. So I think there's always a natural balance. Look at just our physical world and the laws, our natural laws of, even in science, there's a balance all through nature. It's, not just with, say, air pressure, for example. You get air pressure, or hot and cold heat will flow towards where there's cold until, you have two rooms with an open door between them. And you have hot air in one room and cold air in the other. And then suddenly, you open that door, you remove that block. Well, the air is going to balance out and it's going to flow, and it flows in a certain way. The hot air is flowing up at the top part, coming through the door, and the cooler air is closer to the ground, but they exchange until eventually both rooms are about the same temperature. Well, they say the theory is, same temperature, but, so that's the idea. It'll balance out to the same temperature, which in nature, it never gets exactly the same, but, the flow will stop and slow down as it's balancing out, so we can see that in the physical world, with those laws that most of us have learned, even in the public school system, in our science class, natural laws and whatnot. But I think, obviously we see that with behavior in animals too, and then with us, we're humans. We are technically animals. So if you think we're more intelligent, hopefully, but I just think that's kind of a similar balance is, it happens. You see a business, it gets huge probably because first it's exciting, it's new. And look at Amazon. It just took off. It providing great services. That's why people tend to like it. They got one place they could go, and it gets so big that now it's all mostly about profits. And the same thing's going to happen. Before, Walmart was just, a smaller department store, and it was growing for many, many, many years and decades. Got to a certain point, just started taking off and taking over. And it's amazing. Everyone wants to go shopping at Walmart. They get great prices, and then things begin to happen. It starts to stagnate. The name stagnates, because also with us consumers, we like to see something new. And I know we've talked about that. I think even last week talked a little bit about that. So, same thing, we're going to see any big business, it's auto manufacturer or whatnot. We like to see new things, new and exciting. So you're going to have a big business, and as long as they obey the rules, okay, so they grow. But my point is that because of these natural laws and just these the way these things balance out naturally through just our human behavior, they look at it and say, Amazon, okay, great, it's getting old now. It's pretty cool. We'll still use it, but it's nothing new. Want something new. Meanwhile, they're growing and growing because people are still using it. They're getting too big for themselves, and it will happen most likely. They'll either have to stop growth or cut things out. Somehow in nature, the natural laws will force them to start cutting departments, cutting services, doing something like no longer giving you free returns, right? I think they're starting to begin to charge things like that. Things that that the consumers loved about them are going to start to disappear. Their customer service, naturally, as a company gets huge, it's going to get bad. You ever try to deal with Facebook or Google for For example, if you accidentally violate their terms, they don't help you find out what terms you violated. They said you just violated the terms, but basically, you're just like, hey, which term? I want to fix it. It was an accident. They're like, here's the link to our terms of service. Go read it yourself, basically. Like, wow, the customer service, because they have so many people, they just don't need you anymore. So they can do that. So it's a natural progression, and nobody's on top of that there. So they're not making sure to say, hey, don't turn into a dickhead. As the company gets big, don't turn into basically an asshole. But that happens on a customer service level. The top executives might not see it, but in the customer service, they're basically like, hey, you need us. We set the terms. And companies do that. Like, me driving a truck, and I drop off at a big retailer, and you see they set the rules. They're stricter too. Yeah. You want to be your company wants to be able to, use their business as this giant company, for transporting their goods there. Well, you got to have your drivers comply with these rules, all these extra rules. And they're basically, they can be late, but if the truck driver shows up late, they get, there's issues. They can't come early. They got to show up right on time, basically. But if you show up on time and the retailer, they're late and make the truck driver wait, okay, they'll that's okay, they think. So they command the rules. Sometimes they have to pay a detention thing in the contract, but they'll, the trucking company's not going to want to force that because they want to keep that contract. So it's things like that. Under normal human behavior, the company gets so big, they don't have to kowtow, to the customers and to their suppliers, and pretty soon customer service on all levels starts to go out the door. They're no longer preferred. They're getting basically too big for their britches. And then another competition comes up. Looks better. Now there's something new. And then they grow and they say, hey, look, we can, they see the weakness and say, hey, look, we can provide that customer service, and if we maintain that playing field, that's my whole point, is that allows that new competition to come up, and it takes over. And now that big company has to kind of shrink a little bit to maintain, because they don't have the customers they used to. So they're going to shrink, and the natural process is going to hinder their growth. And that's the point, So they're going to want to collude with government and try to bend the rules to help them to survive. So they don't want to die, obviously, as a company. They want to keep those profits coming. So they're going to go out kicking and screaming, right? So we need to have those strict rules that are honest and fair, that allow them to survive. Just say, hey, it's okay. Just do your honest business. You can make billions of dollars doing honest business. What's the deal with, why do you got to be a dickhead? I don't mean to use those words, but I mean, it's the only thing really appropriate is to say is, why do you got to be the idiot, the idiot kid on the playground who just goes off, crying and screaming when you just, when you can't win, and obeying the fair rules, the agreed upon rules. You just can't win, so you go off screaming to your mommy and daddy, which is the government, and saying, I need you to bend the rules for us so that we can stay in charge, and we'll keep kicking back money to you. So it's, I can't say I'd be much better. Hopefully I would, but maybe not. So I'm not going to argue and say that I wouldn't become corrupt. I'd hope I wouldn't, but I think we all need to understand that we're human and it can happen. So we got to get together as people, I think, and, try our best to keep the playing field even. So natural competition will help to spank us all and keep us all behaving. If that's a good way to say it, right? All right. Take another drink there and cool my throat off after those rants. So that's why I want to talk about that. Yeah, that's another thing. These companies get together and start overstepping their bounds and trying to create these rules. Now, what that's going to do to other small suppliers and what it's saying here in the stuff I'm reading is that big companies will have the money to have their personnel dedicated to writing, keeping up with these reporting requirements, their emissions reporting. It'll be the smaller suppliers, the smaller companies, where it's going to be such an extra cost and time, money and time, it's gonna stress those small suppliers out. Now, meanwhile, in the economy, if you've got inflation happening in certain areas, or you say, for example, gas prices are causing prices to go up, big companies are absorbing it. It's still painful for them, but they're absorbing it. The smaller businesses are having trouble because of the increased, say, fuel costs, which cause many other products that they rely on to also be more expensive. So many of their costs are going up. Now they have to do this extra reporting. So it's just an extra stress that's going to push some of these suppliers out, and then the big ones will be there. So it's kind of like it'll help in getting rid of all the small competition, and you'll have these big suppliers there, and then they can all collude and get together and say, hey, let's take care of each other. Hey, you want to be a part of the big boys and big girls club? You just don't worry. Just do what we say as an organization, and we got your back. If you don't comply with these rules and regulations, well then, hey, you're out, and you're out on your own. And we've got all the political contacts and everything we can weaponize and come at you. They got the IRS, they got whoever else they can got them, put them in their pocket. That'd be a horrible scenario to see developing. And the dumbest thing about it is, it'll also come back to bite them in the end. It'll come to bite them. It's a natural process of life, I believe, that you can't escape. If you get engaged in this corruption, and you create a scenario where good competition can't get there, and it affects the opportunities for other people to get where your company got. Well, then what happens if something unforeseen happens and your company goes under? Now you got to navigate the rules to get up there, and you don't have it. You lost your money, you lost your standing in the community. Now you got to rebuild from the ground up. But you helped to kick the ladder off. You got to the roof, to the top, and then you kicked the ladder out so no one else could get up there. You're like, look where I'm at the top, but you're there with a bunch of other corrupt people who say, well, now who's going to be the only ones up here at the top? And then they start pushing each other off, symbolically speaking, until there's only a few there. And now they all hate each other, all suspicious of each other. And we've seen it throughout history. Leaders that take over in a nefarious way. And then pretty soon they get paranoid because everybody else is like, oh my God, they're going to turn on me because they turned on everyone else. And then that leader sees their staff and people around their staff are starting to look paranoid. They're thinking, oh, maybe they're going to turn on me, and they get extra paranoid. So they start turning on each other. Happens throughout history. It's just natural. It's the dumbest thing to see these intelligent, extremely skilled people able to run massive companies and to run countries, engaging in this almost adolescent behavior. And not having the foresight to say, hey, whoa, we need to stop here. Some of these same people know how to say when they're drinking alcohol, for example. And they'll make fun of like alcoholics. They're like, oh, they just can't stop, can they? Once they start drinking, they got to keep going. But they do the same thing with a different aspect of life. Once you get to a certain size, once you get to a certain power level, it's like taking more drinks. It's time. Hey, whoa! I think I'm starting to go. I'm getting a little drunk here. I think it's time to. I think I'm done drinking for the evening. Right? You see people do that all the time. They can control it. They don't want to get to that level. Well, other people, they just want to get hammered every time. They're like, once I'm here, it just feels so good. I'm going to keep going, another drink and another drink. Well, it's like that with the power, right? And the collusion and all that. They can't see that they're starting to destroy themselves. Because it feels so good. They feel like they get the power, but they're heading towards disaster. It's just a natural progression of life. Like someone drinking alcohol. You can only drink so much till you pass out. And like these companies, they can only collude so much. And you can only get so much power, no matter who you are. Be the greatest dictator in the world or whatever. You can only have so much power before it starts to fall apart. And this is common sense. So what are they doing? Why the heck are they're still reaching for it, like an alcoholic reaching for another drink? And that's how they need to be looked at, like an adolescent behavior, to say, hey, it's okay, chill right now. You're worth billions. let's start to cut back here. Just let's see what we're doing. We need more profits. Why don't you do something else? I don't know. But that's where they should put their brains and their efforts, not into trying to take over everything and then start to get into politics and say, let's start to, now that we're so huge, let's start to organize. Let's start getting into the how to organize society business. And he's like, no, come on, man. I don't want some online bookstore that turned into a giant retailer to decide, how I live my life. I don't want some like a car manufacturer that just manufactures a vehicle. Vehicles just something you get in and go from point A to point B. It's not benevolent. They're going to have a giant company, but they're not benevolent. They weren't sent by angels. So it's like, what business do they have to try to organize society? Except for the fact, now I will say this, if they've organized businesses to such a level they have great executive experience, okay, that is understandable. Wanting to contribute their experience, their executive experience towards the running of this world, that is understandable. But there's a fine line. When they want to contribute that, well, they're going to start putting their input in to say, because we all do. I think it should be a certain way, right? That's what I've been ranting this whole time. They think things should be a certain way. Well, they're going to take their expertise and try to push for that. So I guess the thoughts would be, how do you mitigate that? How do you encourage them to contribute their intelligence and experience towards making this a better world and organizing it without using that experience to collude with other businesses to actually force the changes? Maybe that's the key. Maybe that's the key, is to make it so that they can't force the changes by colluding together and creating these like initiatives that will be in favor of nothing but their friends, basically. In this situation, other big businesses, by forcing these reporting requirements that nobody has scientifically proven is going to be helpful at all, except for scientists literally who were paid to say so. That's a whole other discussion. When I looked into that, there's a lot of corruption there too. The other scientists trying to speak out, and they're saying they were just ran out, ruining their careers and everything, which I got a pet peeve about that, because science is supposed to be pure. There's supposed to be no politics in science. I was a math major in college for about 3 years, and I love that there's a pureness to it, and there's no room for politics in mathematics, and in pure science there can be no room for it. If you're going to do real science, you have to, basically you go through your scientific method, and what you come up with is what you come up with. You don't try to force. You don't say, hey, here's the result we want, so that we can get the people's, hey, scientists, here you go. We got a bunch of money, and if you want it, you got to come up with these results that support this. Can you do that? If you want funding, then you're going to do it. But if you don't, then okay, you don't get our money. So you can continue to be a starving scientist. And then, so they're like, okay, if I need funding to keep operating in my field as a scientist, well, then I need to find a scientific study that will support this and looks real and will convince the general public, who are not scientists, and good enough to even to convince other scientists, maybe even. It's just, they hide some of the other data, or they just don't. Typically, that's how they do it. They just don't include certain data in their formulas and in their experiments. They omit data. It's the same as lying through omission. Because mathematics, for example, doesn't lie, but the person utilizing, say, mathematical formulas, they can be deceptive by leaving certain variables out. So there's my rant on that. And I think that's I like that we can talk this business about the world and related to business, because it does affect our lives. Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk about, just some real quick, because we're coming to the end here, is I just saw some stuff going on, in world trade. Don't want to get too much into it, but I noticed, that world trade it looks like it's starting to kind of come back, but everything is reorganizing. So with the pandemic, kind of world trade went down a little bit, but now, it looks like it might be slowly, it's coming back, But while it's coming back, it seems that there are new partnerships being made. So I wanted to mention that I came across some info about that. So if you want to do research on it, it is pretty interesting. You'll see that there are, say if there were trade tariffs between the U.S. and China, during that time, the trade wars, if you could, if you could call them that, we were still trading heavily with China, but it reduced quite a bit. Well, it just forced each the U.S. and China to look for other partners. So the world trade was still going on. They were it's just reorganizing who they're trading with. So, people wondering what's going to happen with that. You're looking at business of the future. It looks like the world trade is still, it's growing, but it's not growing as fast as it was recently, but that's always going to fluctuate, right? Going to come and go. But the fact that it's still growing is good, but it's also reorganizing, it seems. There are different countries making different partnerships. And let's see, I can see here to report in imf.org. Let's see. So the American, and I'm reading here just a little part of their article here. American and Chinese tariffs introduced in 2018 did not reduce trade. They curbed trade between the U.S. and China as expected, but trade in the products most affected by the tariffs grew among the rest of the world. So in other words, trade was merely reallocated, not reduced, and the tariff war did not stop other countries, such as members of the African Union, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, from pursuing regional or plurilateral trade agreements. So looks like, basically, like I was saying, that's what I meant by that. Here's an example of that. They're just saying it didn't stop it. It just caused them to look for different partners, and the trade was happening, in other areas. So for those same countries. So if you're interested, there are some really cool websites out there that you can look up for that are free. Now, there's some that want you to pay, or if you want on these that are free, there might be other services they pay for, but you can get a lot of free data on there. And one of them is the OEC. I think if I do that at oec.org, I believe. Well, it's the, let's see here. Let me find, because there's a link. I can just read it to you, and then you can go right to that page. Let me look at my favorites here. But it's a great resource. If you want, you want to do research, they have great visuals. Okay, so it is the here it is, the Observatory of Economic Complexity. And I've looked at this for years. And they have changed over the years, but you could go to, here's the website. It's oec.world. That is .world. So oec.world. And that's the link that I'm showing here as I go to the homepage. And there's all kinds of visualizations. Now, let's see if you go to right on the front page there, and it'll say, it says the best place to explore trade data. You'll see a little search bar right near the top on the right now, currently as I'm recording this, the top left side of their homepage, and not the top but near, right below the main title that says the best place to explore trade data, you'll see a little search bar, and just click on that. Even if you don't enter something, just click on it, and it brings you to another page, and that is where it looks really just interesting. It makes you excited to want to just click on each one. So it shows you all these different areas, regions you can click on. But on the very top left one is world. So if you want, just for example, click on world, and it'll bring you to their visualization, which I love. The data you can get there is just fascinating. Okay, now you can see. Now they've changed it since then, since I first looked at it. You got to click on where it says a search bar if you want to enter a certain region. But what they do is on that page they'll give you an overview. So you're going to world. Let's see here. Click on that. Okay, it'll show World Trade 2021, because now that's the thing. If you want trade data that is the most recent, you're going to have to pay for that. You want free? Well, it takes time for them to compile all this, right? This is trade data from from all the products, as they're traded, they're going across, through customs, international borders. It takes time to organize all this. And if you want it, say, for 2022, well, you got to wait till 2022 is over. And then when are they going to have that available for you? Well, usually if you want it faster, it seems you want it faster, you got to pay for it. You want to get the free version, it's going to be, it's going to be a little delayed. You're going to have to wait till, if you want 2022, you're going to probably have to wait until 2023 to get the 2022 data for free. So right now I can see World Trade in 2021. It's just showing right here, 21 trillion. Top exporter in 2021, it says China. Now this is on this report, and it says 3.34 trillion. Top exporter. That's top exporter in 2021 was China. And then below it shows the number 3.34 trillion. That's the top exporter, China, in 2021. Now the top importer was the United States, 2.73 trillion in 2021. So, but the most complex economy was Japan in 2021, 2.25. And I don't know what that number represents because it doesn't say T next to it for trillion. So it's probably not dollar amount. There's complexity with, what type of products you're importing and exporting and the relationship between them. Because if you're importing one category, one product, there are going to be other products you're most likely to also import along with it. Like, say, just to pick something that's not even related to Japan, just anything like, say, if you're manufacturing automobiles, there's several parts that come along with that. You're going to be importing a lot of electronic products too to support the computerized components in the vehicle. Other aspects, that anything to make that vehicle. So if you're importing the vehicles, you're probably also going to be importing a lot of parts for repairs and things like that. So there's things like that, and it's a lot more complex than that. But if you take a look at that, that'll take time. Obviously, that would require more than one show to go through, and I am not an expert on this. I love to use this for my own research, for business, and for the trade markets. I'm fascinated with it. So check that out. Yeah, that's oec.world. So it'll give you those numbers and gives you an overview. Like it says countries. In 2021, the world's biggest exporters were China. It gives the number, and then the United States, then Germany, then Japan, then South Korea. It's interesting. And the world's biggest importers were, starting with the biggest, so it's United States, then kind of going down from there. Next largest was China for importers. Next was Germany. Next, Japan and France. Now that's pretty interesting. I mean, look at the size of some of these countries like Japan compared to the size of China, the physical geographic size, that is, the region. Germany, that is not that big. I mean, compared to the United States or compared to the size of the geographical region of China or the United States, look how powerful they are economically. There's a lot of trade, so it's very useful to know. And I think because the world is going global, whether we like it or not, because communication is getting easier, travel is getting easier, transfer of goods is getting easier. So logistics and all that, they're going to get less expensive. They're going to get cheaper. So it's going to be more and more affordable for the everyday people, and which we can see. Like you've got these giant retailers. But one thing we're seeing also is that these giant retailers are usually sticking to their own, mostly being done in their own country. They're crossing borders, but there's still some problems with that. But eventually that's going to start to change. There are a lot of online retailers in other countries that you've never heard of that are in their countries are big business. You've got in Vietnam, all these different, I'm just picking out of my mind. South America and Asia and Europe, other places. They've got companies you've never heard of here in the United States, and they're growing. And maybe in their country you've heard of, people there have heard of them. But imagine that if they're not the word of mouth, they're not a name that is just known by word of mouth, a household name. That's what I was looking for. If they're not like a household recognized name where everybody knows them in that country, then, there's a lot of people in their own country that don't know about them. So imagine worldwide. It's as if they don't exist at all. But you start digging into their, like into their country, you'll see there are an amazing amount of online retail shops starting up. There's competition now. Eventually, that's going to go global. And now the awareness of it, as we cross those cultural barriers, it's going to change. And language is still a big thing that is blocking us. Cultural differences, of course, but language is especially, because these websites in different languages, it's not easy to shop on a website that has a language you don't understand, right? How you get a shop in there, you don't know what the heck you're buying. And then there's banking too, payment processors. But the payment processors are starting to, I think they're reaching further than the translations are. Translations, it turns out, are it's labor intensive for them to have actual good translations on complex multi-vendor marketplaces. Can you imagine having Amazon and you have it translated into any language, every single menu item? We take it for granted, but you look at every single place you see a language, you see English written, all of the links. There are so many links. Each one of those, not just the text. You could translate text. You could go into a translator and the text will still not be perfectly translated. You've got things like Google Translate and other free translators you could create. And if it's the same text on your website, you could create text in a different language. But this is the links. These aren't the operational links, that people need to use on a multi-vendor marketplace where you have different vendors and each one is in a different language, all on one marketplace. How can you just change the language and the whole marketplace is another language along with all of the links? You just say, let's switch it to Chinese. Now, every link you push, every shopping cart, everything in it, it's all Chinese. That takes a lot of work. And even the big companies don't like it. And then there's customer service. If you're dealing with people all over the world, like customer service, to be able to deal with them, the different time zones and everything, how do you handle that? Unless you're big enough to have offices in those areas. So that's why. I think, you're going to have a lot of because the trends are showing a lot of, smaller marketplaces are starting up. They're not going to have that reach, but they can specialize in something. They can't reach globally quite yet, but they can still, if you pick a language that's common, they can still have a platform that's global. Just like trademarketglobal.com. And that's our, obviously what we're related to. That's our sponsor, and that's our marketplace. Trademarketglobal.com is in English right now, and we'll be adding other languages. But because English is spoken in many parts of the world, but the ideal situation would be to have more than one common language and to have all the languages. So I have a personal knowledge of how difficult it is to do that. And, of course, to have all the support for that. So now your tech department, if you have any problems with the language, you need to have people who speak that language to deal with tech issues. And there's a lot of compliance issues, a lot of things that crossing the borders, crossing, from one language to another, it's something simple like fonts, and then you got compatibility with browsers. All over the world, different browsers, and not everybody in some of these smaller countries have the most up-to-date computers. So whatever programs you're using to suddenly switch to another language, well, now you switch to another language, what kind of font is being used? Is that compatible? Can their computer display it on their monitor, their computer monitor? So when it comes to that, it can be a nightmare, but it's getting better, and it's getting better and better and better. So there's still a lot of growth and improvement that needs to happen in the multi-vendor, the online retail shopping when it comes to the global markets. So that's what I want to stress: the global markets. If you're just dealing within your own country or group of countries, that's already a huge market. But just keep in mind, the global markets, they're getting more and more accessible, and that's just massive. And there's a lot of potential there. So I think it's better for any company to jump on and start learning right now. Learn about the global markets. Do what you can do right now, but get yourself positioned so that when you want to, you can slowly start to add in another country, another region you want to sell to. Add in more abilities slowly by slowly, so it's sustainable, and grow with these growing trends. So that wasn't going to be part of my talk here, because we're coming to the end. We've gone over an hour. I'll try to keep it to an hour, but I love this subject. I love it, looking at these trends. So yeah, that's the visualizations there at. I'll give that website again, oec.world. Look at that. Go to that homepage, explore it, check it out. There's also some other great websites. I can pull these up real quick before we end this. And let's see here. They're free. They'll provide. You got to look on, search through the website for the free visualizations and reporting. And these sites have changed, which is good. They're improving, but sometimes they change where they're in the links. You got to find in the menu, find the reporting. Find the visualizations that are usually amazing. Okay, here's one you could find some great resources, and it says, okay, here I'll give you the website name, and it is comtradeplus.un.org. So if I spell it, it's com, C-O-M, then T-R-A-D-E, then plus, P-L-U-S, all one word together, comtradeplus.un.org. And it says right on the top there, free access to detailed global trade data. So there's a lot of resources you want to explore. You're wanting to start a business and you want to get into global markets, or you just want to see what's going on. It's helpful to know what's going on, even if you're just selling in the United States, to know what's happening globally, because a lot of supplies come from outside the United States. Now, here's another great one. If you look at potential, export potential. So you want to find export potential. So your products, you're here in the United States, say, for example, and you want to sell to other countries. Man, we have all the platforms, and with the internet, there are customers out there that want your products. So you can go to, and here's the website. This is kind of a long one here. I'll just say the name. It's through the ITC, but let me get this website name here for you. Let me see here. Okay, so it's the name. If you Google it, you can see the ITC Export Potential Map. Now that's just for Googling, but if you want the actual website name, okay, that is. I go back here. Before we jump off here, I'll give you this one. Okay, just go to Export Potential. Now that's all one word. There's two words, but put together, no spaces. So exportpotential.intracen.org, and then /en for English. So now intracen, that's INTRACEN.org. So exportpotential.intracen.org, and then /en for English, if you're looking at English. Now, I just want to see if you can get there. If I take the English off of there, what it brings you to. exportpotential.intracen.org. Let's see, will it bring you something that you can find your way? Yes, it does. It does pull up. It automatically brought me to English. So it probably knows based on my browser and region. So you can just go to exportpotential.intracen.org, and you'll see great info there. That way you can look for potential, export potential. You could put a product in there and say, hey, what's the export potential? In what areas, and to give you great information. So that way you have a product, you can say, hey, where's the export potential for this product? Where I have this product or service I want to advertise, and I need to increase my sales, and I want to reach out to other countries. You could put it in there and see. That way you could target it, because there's a lot of stuff you need to do to get your products ready for another country, like translating your product literature. Their culture's different. You might want if they're products you would sell dedicated, selling there are suppliers who could buy it. They might want different packaging because you need different the labeling requirements will be different there. And of course the language will be different. So not only do you have to have it translated, there's different different labeling requirements for what needs to be on the product packaging. But there are companies there that will help you with that. They specialize in that. And that's why it's always good to work with a trade company in that country in the beginning, because they know the lay of the land. They know what's going on. It'll cost you a little more, but in hassles, we found you will save a lot. If you try to do it on your own, you're going into literally a foreign land. You're going to make so many mistakes. In the beginning, you might not, but all of a sudden, bam, you get huge mistakes because you thought you could do it and save money. You end up losing money. It happens time and time and time again. The smartest thing is, go into these countries, because here's one thing I'll leave you with. The United States the economy is not a relationship-based economy when it comes to what governs how business is done and commerce, transactions occur. We're more contract-based. If you look that up, rule-based versus relationship-based societies, and you put business, in a keyword somehow. Just kind of mess with those keywords, and you'll get some good info on that. And it is fascinating that the United States is one of few countries that is rule-based, contract-based. Whereas if you have a contract here and it's a legal contract, that contract holds weight over the relationship. It's stronger because it's enforced in the court of law. In other countries, the relationship is much stronger. You can have a contract, and then it's not as enforceable there. Even if it seemed like it was, according to their legal system, that's a whole other discussion. We could talk about it in another podcast. But trust me, like in China, because I've mentioned in previous podcasts, I've been there many, many times, and my wife is Chinese, so in-laws, I've learned a lot in traveling there, staying there for long periods of time, and talking with many different business people there, many different people in government, just through relationship through family and contacts. That relationships mean more than the contract. The contract is something that guides your friendship there, but if you stop being friends, they will not. If somebody becomes a better friend, a supplier, they will just cut you out. A business, if you don't have a good relationship, they will literally just drop you. Say, hey, we had an agreement. Like, well, it's not enforceable over here. So the relationship means a lot more. So you have to maintain those relationships. So how do you do that if you're not over there in that country, or you don't have a representative that will help you with that? The representative who has those relationships. So you need someone companies to help you bridge that gap. But the good news is they're there, and they're easier to access these days than they were even 10 years ago. And now you can find these providers, and they can help you to get your products into that country, literally with their own language on it. And not only that, the packaging will be appealing to those people in that region. The type of colors, the things that you use, that it's so different in different areas. They will tailor it towards that region. And if you find the right company, it'll help you quite a bit. A lot. It's worth it to look into that subject, though. So it seems daunting, but it's definitely worth it, and it's a lot easier to do now. And we'll talk about that in more future podcasts. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you listening, whether you are listening live tonight or you download this and listen at a future time. So I will be back. We will be back We may have some special guests next week. I'm going to be working on that, for next Sunday. So we're going to try again for Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time, which is 8 p.m. Central time. And that's every Sunday we're going to try for that. So you can look for us then. And we may have some other podcasts, not live, but pre-recorded podcasts that may show up during the week or some week. We may still do that. But like I said, we're gonna keep pushing for the regular Sunday night podcasts. So join in, check us out. If you want to create your own discussion, then please go to our social networking site, which is a part of this. This is where you hear me and special guests and other callers talk about subjects, and you can join in the live chat while we're live or in the comments afterwards at any time. That's what you could do here with this podcast. And this is the Biz Meet Global podcast. But if you want to create your own discussion, that's all your own for your own purposes, even create private rooms or public groups, rooms. You could go to our social networking for business site, which is bizmeetglobal.com. That's B-I-Z and then global, G-L-O-B-A-L. I'm sorry, Biz Meet Global. Don't want to forget that part. So so the biz part is B-I-Z and then Meet, M-E-E-T, and then global, G-L-O-B-A-L.com. So, but all one word with no spaces. So bizmeetglobal.com. Sign up for free. It's a new social networking site where you can just talk about business and any subjects you want, advertise your products, showcase your business deals, anything you want. Gather together and enjoy yourself. And then if you want to hear us, ranting and raving on here, you can join the podcast. And we will be very appreciative. So, hey, everyone, you guys have a